Hello guys, good evening, good afternoon. Today I'm going to be talking about a topic that the statement that I'm making here is going to seem to fly in the face of what everybody else has been saying, that distros don't matter. However, I'm going to sit here and say that distros do matter. And give me a second to explain myself on this one. Because when people say distros don't matter, I do agree with them to an extent, that every distro is just a starting point. And you're going to get the people who say that yes, you can get anything you can get done on one distro on another distro. Now, I understand that the points I'm going to make here they might be kind of subjective. And while I do acknowledge that you can get anything done in any distro, the fact is that some distros make certain things easier, and there are differences between distros, and we're going to get into some of that here. So the first point that I'm going to make is, depending on the distro you pick, the installation process could be different. Some are easier than others. For example, a distribution like Ubuntu or Manjaro or Peppermint or Mint, or take your pick of one of those types of distributions, and they're just point and click. Just point and click, you install it. It's installed. Easy peasy. But then you got other distros like Arch and Gentoo that the installation is not that easy. And I would even though Debian isn't a command line install, I would say that Debian isn't that as easy as Ubuntu or Mint to install. So there's a difference in that, and that could lead you to choose one distribution over another. And in that particular case, that distro mattered. And so I would say that yes, there are certain instances where distros do prove to matter, and this is and these points that I'm making are going to be just a few of them that I can come up with. So the next point that I'm going to make is package management. Now, what do I mean by that? Do I mean that one package manager is better than another? Well, that depends. And I do agree to a certain extent that package management is not that different from distro to distro. Just a different command, different syntax. However, it's not so much the package managers that I'm looking at that are different. It's software availability. Now, before I get everybody jumping on me saying like, well, you can install anything on any distribution. Yes, that's true. However, some distributions make installing certain things a lot easier. Some distributions have a bigger repository. Some distributions have more up-to-date packages. And those factors might lead... Those are factors that might go into somebody's decision-making when they decide on a distribution. It's like, well, what distro is gonna... Like if you're trying to run like a server or something, you might say, well, I want Debian over here because they have a large repository, but they hold their packages back and is very stable, as opposed to saying like, okay, well, I'm running a desktop and I'm trying to game on this desktop, and for that I need the latest and greatest. You might go for like a more of an Arch-based distribution because it's easier to keep everything up to date and it's a little more streamlined. And I would say that for me in particular, one of the things that made me personally choose Arch as my distribution of choice is that a lot of the software that I easily got for Arch, I would have had to go to GitHub, find clone it, compile it from source manually on other distributions. Whereas the AUR, automates the third-party software that I would need. Now, does that mean that the third-party software I get in the AUR isn't available on other distributions? No, of course not. You can go ahead and install anything on any distribution. However, in this particular case for me, the AUR makes it a lot easier and a lot more streamlined for me. And in my case, that made the distro matter. However, that might not matter to you. You might need something a little more stable. You might need something where different factors are going to go into the choice that you make. And those factors by alone, it's like, yeah, the distro matters at that point. The next point that I'm going to bring up is the control of your system. And now, yes, I realize that any distribution you could do anything with. Every distribution is a starting point. And you can remove anything from any distro. You can install anything to any distro. However, again, I bring it to the point of which distributions make it easier to do these things. I would say that an Arch-based distro, or even like Manjaro or something, or even Gentoo, you could say, makes it a lot easier to control your system. Now, does that make it easy for a new user to install and maintain and use? Well, not really. But there goes the factors in too. It's like, do I value ease of use over control over my system, or do I value this? In that case, yeah, distros will matter if this is something that's important to you. And we'll get a little bit into like another point that this might overlap. Some of these points might overlap. But anyway, the next point that I want to bring up is the communities. And the Linux community is a big community, and each distribution has their own community as well. Some communities, some forums are nicer than others, and that might be a factor that goes into your choice of distribution too. Do I want a distribution that's going to have good support? If I have an issue with my system, I can go to the forum and get a polite response, and they'll kind of walk me through it. Or if I go to this community, am I going to get an RTFM? That the community surrounding these distributions are another factor in which distribution we choose. and I'm not going to mention any names, but like for example, an Ubuntu forum, the community might be more willing to walk somebody through an issue that they're having, or walk them through, okay, how do I get this set up, how do I get that set up, rather than an Arch forum where in the Arch forum or in the Gentoo forum they expect you to know what you're doing, at least to a certain extent, and you might get an RTFM, you might get a few rude comments on there. And I'm not saying these people don't exist in the Ubuntu forums or the other like more user friendly distributions, but they seem to be a higher percentage in certain distros over others. And in that particular case, yes, the distro, in this case the community surrounding the distro, which I would say is a contribution to the distribution, the distro matters. Again, a lot of these points are subjective, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. Anyway, the next point that I'm going to bring up is stability. And the reason I put that in quotation marks is because that is, I think, one of the most subjective points that I bring up, because everybody's definition of stability is different. For example, some people define stability as, okay, we keep the versions of the software the same as it works. We don't constantly update it and introduce new bugs into the system. We want a system that's just going to work, and it's going to work the same every time we log into it. And that is a good definition of stability. I understand where that mentality is coming from. Certain machines you don't want to constantly change. You need that stability. But for other people, they'll say, well, I want it to be a bleeding edge system, or at least somewhat up to date. And for me, I find that if I leave software and I let it age, sometimes that can introduce new bugs later on down the road too. For example, if I'm trying to install a new version of a new package, but it has a dependency of a new version of another package, and the particular distro that I'm running doesn't have the newer version in the repository, or they're not really keeping up with it, well, I gotta go compile the newer version from source and do it manually, and it's just those are just headaches. So, I mean, if you're one of those kinds of people, your definition of stability might be something like something that just keeps all the packages up to date and just does it easily, does it automatically. As far as I'm concerned, I've seen just as many bugs get fixed in my Arch rolling release as I've seen come through. Matter of fact, I think I've seen more bugs get fixed than have come through. And I've had a few hiccups here and there. I mean, it is a rolling release. And some people, they don't want, feature updates. You don't want every time you launch LibreOffice, for example, you don't want everything to be moved around and switched around, and you don't want to have to get used to a new workflow. That's another definition of stability I can get into. Everyone's definition is different, and every distribution handles it differently, and that's my point, is that in this particular case, your definition of stability will determine which distribution you will choose, and in that particular case, the distro does matter, because they handle different things with different approaches. And I mean, I don't know if I'm making any sense, or it just sounds like I'm just rambling. I might just be rambling here. And the last point that I'm going to bring up is philosophy. Okay, every distribution has a different philosophy. For example, Fedora, Debian, and there are some distributions that are, FOSS, I guess certified is a word, and you can go to their website and find out that these distributions, they only include free and open source software in their packages, because that's part of their philosophy. Now that's a philosophy that I can get on board with. That's a philosophy that I would love to be able to adhere to. However, you have other computers with certain hardware that might not agree with that philosophy. And that's where other distributions with different philosophies that seem to value functionality over FOSS in some cases. It's like FOSS where you can use it, but if it can't be used, or if it's hot garbage compared to the proprietary, for example, NVIDIA. The Nouveau drivers, at least for me, it's like, I would love to be able to use Fedora or Debian or one of these other distributions, or even something like Trisquil or Parabola, or some of these FOSS certified distributions out there. However, my computer has NVIDIA, and it has an NVIDIA Optimus at that. It's not going to get along with those or if it does, it's going to be very difficult to get along with. And so for me, I'm not going to try to fight with a distribution like that to get my computer working. As much as I would love to run a distribution with that kind of philosophy, as much as I love that philosophy, I value a functioning computer over that. And so I would choose a distribution like Manjaro or Pop! OS or even Ubuntu, or in this case Arch. Distributions that value functionality at least at some point, and value making that functionality easy to obtain. But there are people who will disagree with that and will be hardened and say, no, free and open source software, 100%. I'm going to go full Stallman on this, and I'm only going to use distributions that agree with my philosophy. In that particular case, the distro mattered, at least to you. And so to conclude, and I'm going to bring this up here, is that most of the people who hop onto my channel or onto the other channels and talk about Linux, we all have our favorite distribution. We all have our personal favorite distribution. For me, it's Arch. For some people, it might be Peppermint. For others, it might be Mint. For some, it might be Ubuntu. For others, it might be Fedora. And for each of us, there was something about that distribution that grabbed us in a way that other distros didn't or don't. you notice something different about that distribution, whether it be the philosophy, whether it be the package management system, whether it be this, whether it be that. You notice something different that pulled you in. And if distros didn't matter, then why do we choose different distributions? Why does it matter whether I'm on Arch or Mint or whatever? We notice something different about it. For some people, Peppermint, it might be the community. They do have a terrific community that helps people through. For other people, it might be Arch because, hey, it keeps my drivers up to date. I can get certain software, I can keep it up to date, a little more streamlined. The community might be a little meh, but it's getting better. You gotta weigh those options. And the differences that you'll notice in these different distributions will influence your decision. It will grab you in a way that another one might not. And so I think, I hope that I made my points clear. That, yes, I do believe that distros don't matter to an extent. But that only goes so far. At least in my opinion. And I do recognize that the points that I'm making here are subjective. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section. But the other point that I'll bring up is you're using a certain distribution. If you're running Linux, you're using a certain distribution. Answer me this: would you recommend the same distribution to a brand new user? If your answer is no, then the distro matters. Like, let's say I'm running Arch. Would I recommend Arch to a brand new user? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Maybe depending on where they're coming from. But for the average new user, no. No, I would... Maybe Manjaro. If I'm going to be maintaining the system, I want it to be something that I'm used to. But it can't be something... if their computer can handle it, maybe I'll put Manjaro on it, and in that case, the distro mattered. In that case, the difference in the installation process and in the way the software is installed, not so much the package management because they both use Pacman, but yeah, in a sense the package management would influence my decision there, because I do believe in keeping a distribution rolling. But I acknowledge that bugs could come down the road. And so Manjaro tends to sit on the packages for 2 weeks. And the bugs that I've encountered in Arch, they're usually worked out by then. Usually the issues that I run into are, okay, this other package over here hasn't updated its dependency list yet. And so we can't update yet. Guess what? In 2 weeks' time, it's going to have its dependency list updated. And the issue is going to be non-existent on Manjaro. And so in that case, yeah, the package management, yeah, they hold their packages back 2 weeks. The installation process is just point and click. And I think that Manjaro gives a pretty good balance. However, if that's too advanced, we could talk about Mint, we could talk about Ubuntu, we could talk about these other distributions. In that case, the distro does matter, and it matters to me in that instance. But yeah, this video might just have been me rambling on. I tried to keep things consistent to the points that I was making. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comment sections below. Am I making sense? Am I just rambling, screaming into the sky? Yelling at clouds? But no, I really am curious to see what you guys think. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. If you dislike the video, please dislike the video. Again, I can't promise content. I don't have a lot of free time, but I will try to get out videos when I can. I will try to do live streams when I can. So yeah, I mean, thanks for watching, and have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.